Salvete omnes. Hello, everyone. This is the start of a new series, which is a read-along through the Nāvigātiō Sānctī Brendānī Abbātis, or the Voyage of Saint Brendan the Abbot, where I'll be reading through the original text, going through line by line, and explaining it in English along with any grammar difficulties. So who was Saint Brendan? Saint Brendan was the Abbot of Clonfert in the late 400s in Ireland. He was a very famous Irish saint. And later on, an anonymous Irish monk wrote the story that we'll be reading about him, which details a trip that Brendan took across the Atlantic as he's looking for the promised land of the saints. This idea of like a terrestrial paradise, a new Garden of Eden. And they go to various islands and have various adventures in the sea on the way to find the promised land. So the text we'll be going through is a Latin reader that I put together this past year. So I teach a ninth grade Latin course, and I wanted to go through the Nāvigātiō with them. But the only print edition of this book that I could find was the Carl Selmer Critical Edition, which is out of print and $400. Which is far too much money for a high school course. So I decided we need something that's inexpensive and something where you could just take it and be able to read it and not need like a dictionary or anything. So I put together a reader edition here. It's available on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. And one of the features here is every facing page is a complete, fully parsed glossary for the page that it faces. So instead of, having to flip back and forth all the time, instead you can just look at the facing page. There's also footnotes here to explain any sentences that might cause some difficulty. The graded reader also comes with a simplified version where I took the original and abridged it for faster pacing, rearranged the word order, took out the quote-unquote advanced grammar things. Grammar constructs, so there's no subjunctive in this simplified version. I try to avoid the use of relative pronouns, and so on and so forth, just to make it so it's as easy as possible to just get into and read, to get you familiarity with the vocab and the concepts, so that it's easier to tackle the original version. So the original weighs in at around 13,000 words. And a last note before we get started with the series here. How to interpret these things? Well, one is that it's written by an Irish monk, and it's about a monk who goes on a religious pilgrimage. So I think the only really responsibly way to interpret this is within a Christian frame of reference. So it details a voyage, and there's no reason for us to think that such a sea voyage couldn't have taken place. In fact, in the 1970s, a voyager named Tim Severin constructed a boat just like St. Brendan's, and he successfully sailed across the Atlantic on the first try. So the Irish certainly had the ability to make such a trip at that time. But all throughout the story, we see it's filled with Christian feast days. It's filled with kind of symbolic time periods. They're doing things for like 40 days or for 3 days and 3 nights. They, see a pillar that seems to be like the heavenly city. They see some monks who have a monastery in the middle of the ocean where their chapel seems to be very reminiscent of like the throne room mentioned in the book of Revelation. They meet Judas here, who's sitting on Sundays and feast days. He gets to sit on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic instead of being in hell. So I think a good way to interpret it as well is to ask, well, what's the symbolic meaning of this as well? So I'll be providing that as we go along. And if you buy the print edition that I put together, there's also footnotes as well as a symbolism quick start guide at the beginning. But without further ado, that's the intro. Go to the next video in the playlist to start on chapter 1.